That was more than I meant it to be with the music ending. I don't know what happened. It's supposed to fade out.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or not good evening. Hopefully, I don't think we have anybody in Russia right now, but everyone across the states. I know we're hitting people at different times here, but thank you so much for joining us today. We have a great topic to talk about. I know a lot of our customers that we've been talking to have been thinking a lot about this funding cliff that's coming around the corner, and we wanted to be able to provide a little bit of expertise and insights into some different tactics and options that you could try to help support your technology initiatives in the upcoming year and actually for years and years and years to come. So we've got three awesome speakers here today to talk about that, but I'm just going to run through a couple housekeepings. If you have been here before, you kind of know the drill about taking that exit survey. So if you're here wanting to get the coffee, we need you to stick around until the end to take the exit survey. That's how we know that you were here, you were listening, you're engaged. And then if you take that and you've registered with a school email address, we can get you that coffee at the end of the session. The other thing is if you have questions throughout the session, you can pop them in the chat. I'll be watching that throughout the session. I know our speakers will be keeping an eye on that as well, but we'll get those questions to them throughout the session and then again at Q&A when we have time at the end. This is going to be about 45 minutes. We have a lot of stuff to get through, but we'll make sure that we have a little bit of time. If people have questions for our experts, we can talk those through at the end. But I'm going to pass it over to Scott to really get us going on this.
What a horrible handoff. Hey, everybody, great to see you. I went to grab the mute, but super excited about this topic. If you guys have been around for other topics, I'm weirdly fascinated by these long-term planning and purchases, and I just love engaging this. So, in the site, if you guys put in your questions, we'll have Kate monitoring that, as well as I put in a prompt there. Just let us know who you are and where you're from. That would be amazing. Let's jump into it. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So, awesome. So we're talking about creative budgeting for K-12 technology purchases today, a topic that I hate to say I was pretty ignorant of, but I've learned so much in the past few months by these experts that we have, Eric and Brian, and I'm just so excited to talk about this topic with everybody. But I do want to kind of say we're going to be breaking this up into kind of three specific sections with a Q&A at the end. I'm going to be kicking us off with talking about some long-term planning and budgets that you could do to really enhance your technology adoption. Eric is going to be sharing his expertise talking about some alternate funding sources. And then Brian is going to be sharing something that I think is a super cool feature that I wish I had known more about back in the day, and that's device as a service. And then we'll end with Q&A. Again, if you put your questions in the chat, we can answer them then. That'd be great. If you put them in anytime during our discussion, we'll make sure to get to them at the end. All right. Before we jump into the topic, I just want to do a quick introduction for us. My name is Scott Jonard. I'm a teaching and learning consultant here at Trafera. I've been here for a little over a year and made the transition, I like to say, from a very happy Trafera customer to an even happier Trafera employee. I really appreciate Trafera. For 6 years prior to joining us, I was a Trafera customer as a tech director and as a principal out in California. I spent before that, I was a technology coordinator for a few years. I was a special ed teacher for about 8 years. So in total, about 15 years in education, and just passionate and love the topic of educational technology, especially seeing how it can impact our students. But that's me. Let me pass it off to Eric Odgen.
Thank you, Scott. Eric Ogden here. I'm our Director of Field Marketing and Contracts. Also oversee all of our federal funding sources and trying to, understand that world as best we can in helping our customers. I've been with Trafera now for over 9 years and love what I do and love the people that I work with. And we're glad to be here today and share with you some very important insights, and hopefully you'll walk away with some nuggets that you can utilize as soon as you get off the call. So I'm going to pass it on over to Brian. Brian?
Morning, everybody. My name is Brian Bagely. I work with Trafera Financial Services and here to share some exciting different options in the world of financing, different ways to finance products and IT products within schools.
Awesome. And I am so excited to be sharing the stage today with these guys. I have learned so much from both Brian and Eric. And if you have any questions about spam, Eric is also a spam expert. So was there 12 different versions of spam out there?
15 flavors of spam.
15
and tried them all.
flavors. Yeah. So something to catch up with Eric if you see him at a conference about. Let's jump in to the topic here. So we're going to start with something I'm deeply passionate about. I think, in my opinion, we just can't get away from, and that's really how we can address the long-term planning. We are such a strong believer, and I've seen it so much in the world of education. You really want to have that target out there to kind of vision, and then you want to build the structure around to implement that. And our budget planning is an incredibly important key to that. I want to share this, our real vision and support for us as a company. I also just think it's an awesome graphic, but really, as a company, we really want to make sure that we are supporting the right technology with the right support, and it does equal that bright future. It's one of the reasons why I love working here, and I love the fact that I get to support schools all over the country on their technology initiatives. But I always want to open up with that key question that I feel like is incredibly important when we're talking about our technology adoption. And is your technology making the instructional impact you need it to? I've spoken with hundreds of districts over the years on technology implementation, professional development, structure, systems, planning, budgets. But at the end of the day, it's really about, are you enhancing the learning that's happening in the classroom? And that's really the framework that I think that we should go into anytime we're talking about our educational adoption, our planning, anything like that. So I'm going to be going over 4 key topics that I think are really, really important when we're thinking of long-term planning, and then also thinking of how we can get the most out of our technology to make the greatest impact in the classroom. I really think it starts with this concept of fueling educational dreams, aligning technology with our vision. I'm not going to lie, I tossed my concepts into ChatGPT and I was like, hey, give me some jazzy titles for these slides. And I really liked him, so I tossed him in here. So, so I really like it. But really, I think that the way it says that fueling our educational dreams is so absolutely critically important, that we have to really kind of be cognizant of that. And so we really want to make sure that we're starting with that vision, that entire classroom, what's happening in the classroom. Are we making sure that we have the right technology that supports that vision? Do we have the right technology, the teacher to engage with the interactive flat panels in the front of the classroom? Do we have the right technology so that the students can engage in the highest level of learning available to them? Do we make sure that everything moves us forward in that articulated shared vision that we have? Along with that, we want to make sure not only do we have this incredible investment of our technology, but also is it enhancing our curriculum and learning outcomes? really to make sure I have been that tech director that found out about a new program or an initiative or something that the math department is really excited about, just to find out that it's an iOS app and it doesn't work on Chromebooks, and there's can foster this frustration or this challenge and try to figure out. So really making sure, like, are we actually finding the right solutions to enhance the curriculum, enhance the learning that's happening? Again, I think empowering educators and students to meet those objectives. I think it's incredibly important to articulate that vision. How do you want students to engage with this technology? How can you kind of work within your structure to kind of build that vision and align people to it? So I think it's incredibly important that as you have your vision, your articulated why, if you're a fan of Simon Sinek, as I am, it really funnels and makes those decision making processes so much easier. And then it's also fostering innovation and student engagement, I think, is also incredibly important. And we're going to go deeper into what that means. But really, what we want is we want to create the learning process to be more dynamic, more engaging, having students have new avenues of engaging content and information that they've never had before. If you're familiar with the SAMR model, really moving them to that modification or redefinition frameworks of student engagement and learning. The next, I think, is really, really important. So important when we're engaging. And that's making sure that we are getting our stakeholder input. I think it's incredibly important. And when we're talking about our stakeholders, we're really talking about everyone. We aren't just talking about the students. We aren't just talking about the teacher. We aren't just talking about the tech department. We're really saying we want to involve teachers, staff, students, parents, get that ongoing feedback, collaborate with stakeholders. And you really want to make sure that the more you engage with them, that you're really, really speaking to how can we allocate resources? How can we do training? How can we support? It's so incredibly important. And I will say, for me, when we did our one-to-one initiatives, I always said it was incredibly important that we marry our one-to-one initiatives in the classroom with teacher training and support, involving our PTA or our PTO or our DLAC body or whatever it might be, that you're really making sure that you're communicating with all of your stakeholders, really making sure that people understand not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And then not just doing it once, but making sure that that's a continual process, because we will learn and we will improve and we will see things as long as we're engaging in that conversation. Just like I put here, transparent communication builds trust and support. I cannot tell you how helpful it is to have that communication. One of the things that drives me nuts as a parent, it drove me nuts as a teacher, is seeing stuff where it's like you get a survey, you get something that goes out. It's like, hey, how are we doing on X, Y, and Z? And I give my feedback, and I'm thoughtful and I'm thought provoking, and I take the time to be, and then it just doesn't go anywhere. I just feel like no one ever looks at it. Now that could be true, it could be false. I've been part of district initiatives where no one really ever looked at the data and it was a check box. I've also been part of education initiatives that they were really thinking about the feedback that they were getting, but they weren't necessarily circling back and communicating with our key stakeholders. That's what was informing that process. So I think it's incredibly important that you have that transparent communication, get feedback on a regular basis from all of your key stakeholders, and then maintain that effective communication throughout the process. Again, we're talking about long term. This isn't a one-off. We're writing an E-rate proposal for some sort of infrastructure change in that's happening with the Wi-Fi and access points in the school. We're talking about student engagement. We're talking about learning in the classroom. And for that, that's going to be something we're going to have to train and teach every new year of students. We're gonna have to remind people continuously what we're doing, why we're doing it, how can we improve, getting them. So maintain that effective communication, not just at the start, but throughout your process. I always am such a big fan of saying at the start of every year, I want to have a training and get some feedback on what do people anticipate, how did we do on the rollout of devices, what training do they need, and then at the end of the year, really kind of tailoring some communication, getting that feedback of how did we do on these things. These are the things that we thought were important that we tried to do. Did we meet that? And I think that that's incredibly important as we kind of move forward. And that's also going to help so much when we have our budget discussions, when we talk to our superintendent, when we talk to our CTO, when we do have to do a referendum or put a bond together for the community around us. The more we can engage that community, the more they will be bought into the process of committing and partnering with us in our technology adoption. The next one, I see this so often in education, especially in this post-COVID world, and that is ignoring the price of the total cost of ownership, TCO, of our devices. And it's hard to really think of that. It's not just, oh, I'm going to purchase a Chromebook for $200 and toss it to the student, forget about it, wipe your hands. There's a sequence that says, okay, well, we have to consider, we have oh, that's interesting. I realize that my bullet points are the wrong bullet points for this slide, but that's okay. I'll just talk you through what I had supposed to have on this. And so what we want to do is we want to be cognizant of those total cost of ownership, repair costs, distribution costs. Do we want to have a system where we are have our devices that we're constantly responding to emergency and need? And I kind of have that reflected in some way on this graphic. If you can imagine, like, we purchased all these Chromebooks, we spent $1 million to go one-to-one back in 2020 as a response to COVID. When it comes to replacing those devices after 3-4 years, do I need to hunt down that money again? Do I need to panic and, again, referendums, bonds, communication, fights with the CBO to kind of get that funding? Or can I put systems in place to kind of flatten that? And that's one of the things we're really, really talking about. So when we are considering our technology adoption, when you're creating your plans, it's not just the initial cost you have to factor in, it's that total cost of ownership. I say it often, and I'll say it again, that I believe that a one-to-one initiative is not a one-to-one initiative unless I can ensure that every student has access to a solidly working device that works 100% of the time in the classroom. You can just imagine that classroom, that teacher who has 30 students in their classroom. Every single time that teacher says, students, take out your Chromebooks, open them up, go on to Google Classroom, do this assignment, they need to be able to have access to the devices to do that. And that's just where we are at with technology adoption in the education space in 2023, almost 2024. So really kind of make sure that you are considering that process and tracking that data throughout the life cycle of your device. And like I said, those peaks and valleys of cost, really what we want to do, and I think that this is really critically important, is we think about the entire technology life cycle. Where can we get to be get that longevity, get that consistency, so that, as you can see, instead of these huge peaks and valleys where I'm fighting, I just know every year it's part of my LCAP, it's part of my annual budget plan. I'm going to be spending basically X number of dollars on my technology. There's a lot of ways to do that. So it really takes that strategic planning, that thinking, but really making sure that you are proactive in your upkeep, make sure that you have timely replacement upgrades, and then make sure that you are optimizing your assets. I like that because you really want to think about, again, every one of it's not just about, do I have technology in students' hands and teachers' hands? Do I have the right technology, and is it making the impact I need it to instructionally? Which means that it's a device that works consistently and works well. I know it's going to work today, tomorrow, the next day, that entire life cycle of the devices. So really, I want to kind of remind, we're really talking about, we want to align technology with our vision. We want to engage with our stakeholders, give them power in our tech decisions. We don't want to ignore the price of TCOs, and we want to make sure that we are engaging in smart planning, and that's where we really get that longevity. And I do like this quote from George Couros: "Technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational." I know I've seen that over and over and over again. I'm such a deep believer in that. So I do want to say, our vision is, and a purpose is, to improve lives and improve educational technology in students' lives. And I'm such an advocate of that. Absolute pleasure to get in front of you. I'm so stoked to hand it off to Eric, who's really kind of going to go into these alternative funding sources. So pass it on to you, Eric.
Thank you, Scott. And for those of you who are interested in spam, yes, there are 15 flavors of spam that Scott brought up, and the latest is maple flavored spam, introduced at the Minnesota State Fair this year. And so I did take some of that home and try it. So thank you for the spam plug, a Minnesota original, I guess you could say. But let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about. I want to start by talking about traditional funding sources that you all should be familiar with. Your various title funds. I want to talk a little bit about, maybe some areas in these title funds that you haven't thought about, that you can utilize these title funds for as you're looking at the pending fiscal cliff that's coming up, and maybe other ways to look at your funding sources today. So, for example, Title I, oftentimes we see schools utilize this for their one-to-one implementations. Title I can also be used for your STEM needs as well in your school district. And so, just an area just to mention that. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because there's a lot to cover here. But Title III, obviously for English language learners. We're also seeing this utilized for PD and technology. I'll give you a great example. El Paso ISD was able to provide Chromebooks for their ELL students utilizing Title III funding. So it's certainly an avenue by which one could consider for technology, classroom technology. Title IV also often used for STEAM. We've seen it also used for PD, technology integration in the classroom. And one of our favorite toys to install in schools is the Lou Interactive Playground. We've seen schools utilize Title IV funding for that as well. And so certainly would encourage you to look at that if that's something, and obviously we're not going to cover that on this call, but there will be other webinars where we'll cover that as well. And I encourage you to take a look at that as well. So next slide, if you would. Looking at the pandemic era federal funding, we just saw last week there's been a couple different funds that have ended, and we're looking right now at the ESSER, ARP ESSER or ESSER 3 ending September 30th, and also EANS funding ending September 30th of 24 as well. That's EANS 2. If you'll go to the next slide as well. Many of the schools we're talking to are allocating those funds, right? All those funds have to be allocated by September 30th of 24, but there's a big amount of money, right? We know that, as you can see here on my slide, there's nearly $122 billion in ESSER 3 funds. And all of it has to be allocated by the end of September of 24. By this chart here by Future Ed, you can see that by state, the overall funding is just barely over 50% being utilized that has been allocated at this point. So there's still a lot of allocation that needs to take place over the coming months. And for those that are private schools, EANS funding or EANS 2 is also a $2.5 billion, just like EANS 1. And so that is areas, of course, that you're looking to allocate those funds for, not just for technology, but for other needs of the school district as well. If you go to our next slide. So as we look at ESSER funding, because obviously that being the biggest funding pool, there's some challenges on the horizon, right? Many of our schools are facing some unique challenges as it relates to kind of this large sum of money that schools have been allocated. And but if you find yourself, you know, when you got greater than 30% of your students are high need, or your districts are high need, or you're utilizing your overall budget is 8% or greater of utilizing ESSER funds, then you find yourself in that greater pinch point right here on this Venn diagram, where 15 states right now are going to be having quite the challenge when it comes to the fiscal cliff ultimately coming. I know some states are trying to help kind of fill the gap, but most states are not. And so, you know, it's really up to the schools to really take a good, close look at what's coming up ahead and how do we mitigate that. So if you'll go to my next slide, I'm gonna just touch on these briefly. And this is by no means the only sources, but some sources that one can consider as well as we get closer to the fiscal cliff here. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, of course, this was passed in 22 for $1 billion funded through Title IV Part A. In fact, 185 million was awarded in December of last year. And of course, this is built to expand on vital mental health services, to provide additional support to districts, to design and enhance their initiatives to help promote safer, more inclusive, and positive school environments for the students. These monies have to be spent by December of 26. There is the, and the links are all here, of course. The 21st Century Community Learning Grant, also supported by the BSCA, where they infused about 50 million into this program, which has been around for about 25 years. This program offers, you know, support for high need, high poverty communities, for after school programming, to design, to enhance the participants' well-being and academic success. And of course, much of that can be done through technology as well, if it's utilized right. Of course, there's the IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is for early intervention and SPED services for children with disabilities and their families. The Google Challenge on Climate Innovation. Some schools are, I know that some schools could actually tackle this and tap into that 30 million that Google is making available. And so certainly something I would recommend taking. This goes to organizations that will help map out emissions, restore ecosystems, and enable small businesses to better understand their carbon footprint. And then the last grant I have listed here is the Rural Technology Education Grants. And this is really to help rural schools with their education technology projects, as well as assistive technology projects. And then last but not least on this list is the ECF Window 4, I say question mark. For those of you who took advantage of ECF in Windows 1, 2, or 3, there is the distinct possibility of a Window 4, although nothing's been said officially. We do know that through Windows 1, 2, and 3, there's about 700 million that has yet to be awarded to schools. We know right now in Window 3, which is the final window, that they are down to the 40% level of approving applications. They're not far from finishing out all of the applicants from window 3. And what we do know is once we get to the end of this month, that windows 1 and 2, the window will close for any reimbursements for the funding in windows 1 and 2. That will, in addition, free up additional funding. So we could see anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion in available funding still left over once windows 1, 2, and 3 are done. Now, window 3 is complete June 30th of 24. All of the deliveries have to take place by then. So if there is going to be an announcement on a window 4, I would suspect that we will see something in the early part of next year. And so be on the lookout for that as well as a potential funding source for classroom technology. But ultimately, all of these funding sources and many others out there are there to help you kind of bridge that gap. But there are other ways to actually extend your budget, as Scott's talked about, and I'm going to hand it over to Brian, who's going to tell you about Device as a Service, which is a fantastic program. And I'm eager to hear more about it because I know I've talked with Brian a few times about this, but I know that there's some really good points here that you'll want to pay close attention to. So Brian.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. Once again, I'm Brian Bagely here to talk about Device as a Service and really other ways to finance equipment and things to be aware of that are out there in the marketplace. Go ahead, next slide. So again, I'm with Trafera Financial Services. We're here to help when some of the things that Scott and Eric have talked about potentially aren't available, and how can we help you extend your budget further to come up with something creative that meets the needs of your district when it comes to financing for equipment. So really the things to think about when you're talking about Device as a Service, whether you use the term Device as a Service, operating type lease, things like that, it's really what we try to do is a hassle-free approach to technology management and life cycle management of these devices for your districts. It just offers you a different and unique way to look at a single package throughout the life cycle of your equipment. And really it gets you up-to-date equipment when you need it, on time, and the right type of technology for districts. So things to think about here with Device as a Service or any type of financing of your technology is really first and foremost the cost effectiveness. So it allows you to acquire the latest and greatest advanced technology without incurring the upfront costs. So you really look at, managing that budget so you don't see these big spikes every 3 or 4 years as you refresh that equipment anyway. It also helps with budget flexibility. DAS can spread the cost of that technology equipment over the term. So we do the best we can to match the outgoing cash with the use of the technology, as opposed to, prepaying for all that technology, not knowing for sure how long it's going to last in your environment or how long you might be able to use it. And again, including maintenance and support, software, everything can be rolled into a DAS agreement. And again, we try the best we can to match the use of the equipment to the maintenance and the software and the services that go along with that throughout the life of that piece of equipment. So one of the other advantages with a financing type agreement is the scalability. So, with different types of agreements, you can scale up or down your technology as you need it. So as enrollment changes, as different needs change, maybe the type of technology you're using at different levels within the school can be scaled up and down throughout the term of an agreement. I think the bigger thing too to think about, I think we can go to the next slide. So other creative things to think about as you're thinking about looking at a financing solution for your school is the white glove service that comes along with with any financing. So, talk to us about what the white glove return services are to fit your needs, asking the right questions along there as far as how do damages work, what's included in the return. We have dedicated contacts throughout all of our financing transactions to have those conversations along the way. We also have access to other equipment. So if you have short-term needs as part of our financing and DAS agreements, we also have the ability to pull equipment from other contracts on a short-term notice, short-term need. So certainly reach out and ask for those types of things. So really we're focused on trying to develop a customized solution that works best for your district. There's not a one size fits all here. So another example of that is deferred payment plans. Maybe you need some additional equipment in the middle of a school year, but you don't have the budget today. Could we set up something for you to get equipment in the door, but you don't have to make a payment until your next budget cycle? And then we also have a couple of different things that we like to talk about with Trade IT and Flex IT. Flex IT gets back to that thought of flexing up and down with your technology during the term. So because you're committing to X amount today, that doesn't mean it can't change throughout the term of a financing or a device as a service. We can rework and change that structure as we go. In addition, if you have old equipment and you're looking at moving towards a DAS solution, we can offer value for that old equipment and apply it to a new solution for you. So hopefully, if you've got a closet full of old technology you're looking to get rid of, maybe we can come in and get you value for that equipment and apply it to a new DAS solution or your next financing. Next slide. So I'll leave you with really kind of how we look at the different financing options available to you. DAS Flex is really the focus of where the market's going. So device as a service, really looking at this as more than just a lease, but looking at it as a service. So including your maintenance, including the equipment, including the software, including the return costs at the end. How does the recycling work at the end? You have options. Just because you're choosing today a device as a service doesn't mean that that's the way you go for the rest of your existence in that school. You can choose to purchase the equipment at the end of a DAS term. You could extend that for another 6 months if you need to get to the end of a school year. You could simply return the equipment, and what that means is basically getting it into a central location. We send packing material, we pick the equipment up, and you move on to the new equipment that you're working on. And then there's the other option, which is the dollar buyout lease. So this allows you to purchase the equipment over a period of time. So again, it does flatten your budget. It gives you a little less options at the end of term because you own that equipment at that point. So if I leave you with anything here, as you're looking at your next purchase of IT equipment, really to be thinking about from a financing option isn't really about the rate or the cost. Look at what do you intend on doing with this equipment? How long do you intend on using this equipment in your environment? If you think you're going to stretch the use of this equipment to 6 or 7 years, that dollar buyout lease might be the right option for you. If you're 3, 4, and 5 years, the DAS solution could be a great option for you because it doesn't lock you into doing it one way. It just provides you with some additional flexibility, not only during the term at a lower payment, but it gives you some flexibility at the end of term to decide where you're at in your current technology environment, where your budget's at, how's the equipment working, what are the ongoing costs of maintenance of old technology. It just provides you with some additional flexibility. Scott, back to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian, so much. And I will say we have a couple of questions that came up in our Q&A, which is awesome. Please don't hesitate to let us know how we can support. Our information is there. You can email us. You can let your primary contact, your rep, know that you want to connect with myself, Eric, Brian, whatever it is. And we also have this exit survey. I will say, I always so appreciate talking to these guys. Brian is such a wealth of resource. If I did leasing when I was back in the day, and unfortunately I didn't know about Brian, and I could tell you about my story. Usually I get cold sweats and everything because I was dealing with a company that just treated us like anything else in the industry. And something that I so deeply appreciate about Brian is he knows K-12 so intimately because that's what we do is K-12. And I've just learned so much about his work, services we offer. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, Eric, so much for this. Kate, did we have any questions?
Yes, we did have some questions. So the first question came up right after you were done, Scott, right away. Brian asked how to factor in recycling into your plan. And I know, Brian, you also kind of tapped into recycling as part of that budget planning. But if anyone has anything to say about recycling,
I
Brian,
will say e-wasting and recycling is, for me, when I was in that world, it was a pain. And it's one of the beautiful things about what Brian was saying with device as a service. I think it's just one more added benefit to kind of take that for you. Anything to add, Brian?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it gets to that same point I made earlier is the financing, no matter how you look at it, you're hedging against obsolescence. So are you comfortable with that obsolete technology in your environment? You know you have to recycle it some way, or do you want to rely on experts like us to take that equipment out and recycle it, reuse it, use it for parts? I mean, those are things we're experts at every day in the marketplace. We're constantly working with old technology to find new homes for it and better ways to recycle it. So take our expertise and use it at the end of those terms. And that includes, reach out to us at the end of term if it's owned equipment. We have a plethora of partners out who specialized in used equipment, and maybe it's possible we can get you some value for it. So either way, whether you own it and you're trying to get rid of it, or you're coming off of a device as a service or another type of financing solution, always reach out and ask.
and then the only other question that we got in the chat was about devices as a service payments, whether they're monthly or annual, or what the setup is with those.
I'm being a little redundant here, but again, it's really, we want to try that make that work best for the specific school district. Most school districts pay annually, but we have the ability to do quarterly and or monthly payments. So really what works best for the district, we can also change during the term.
Great. Awesome. Well, that's all the questions that we have in the chat. I'd like to thank our presenters again today. Thank you, Brian, so much, Scott, Eric, and of course, thank you everyone for participating and being here with us today. If you have any more questions regarding creative budgeting solutions, whether that's some of those options that Eric was talking about earlier or some of the financing options that Brian tapped into, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us. Yeah. Great. Oh, and then, hey, Scott, can you pop up my slides one more time? I've got a few more things to talk about. We have
absolutely
a ton of webinars coming up this month. So if you are wanting to get more food for your brain or you're wanting to get some more coffee, we have a lot of other options for you in the next couple of weeks. So this week on Thursday, we have another webinar all about Google Workspace for Education, kind of about finding the value in the license that you currently have, and then planning for the next steps in renewing your license. So that one's specific. So if you are a Google Workspace for Education user at your school, you feel free to join us for that one. It's going to be great. Next Wednesday, we're super incredibly excited to have Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook with us. He's going to be presenting sticky brain-friendly learning with Google Workspace. He's such a fun, if you've never seen him present, he's so engaging, he's so fun, and brings so much brain science together with different tools to really give some instantly actionable tips. So that is going to be so much fun. That's going to be
could not recommend that.
Could not recommend it enough. That's gonna be next
Absolutely.
Wednesday, October 11th. Next, and then the following Tuesday, October 17th, we're doing part 2 of that Google Workspace for Education renewal series. And then the next Wednesday, October 18th, Scott is going to be presenting with our other friend from Trafera, Josh, about, I'm sure a lot of you have seen his sticky tech planning presentation before, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. Josh is going to be talking about really how professional development also fits into that. So we're doing that on Wednesday, October 18th. And if you can either scan those codes to register, or you can go to trafera.com/events, and you can find all of those online and register there as well. All right, I think that is definitely all that we have to say today. Again, thank you so much, all of you, for being here, for our presenters. We really appreciate all of you, and we hope to see you at one of these in the future. Great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Kate.
so
Thank you,
much.
everybody.
Bye.